Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Weekly, where we discuss the latest in Israel's geopolitical developments. I'm Aaron Porras, and with me today in the studio are the former media advisor to two prime ministers with 20 years of experience in the IDF's intelligence community, Colonel Miri Eisen, and Dr. Mordechai Kedar of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar Ilan University, who served for 25 years in the IDF military intelligence as well. Now today we will be discussing two pressing topics: the recent hiccup in Fatah-Hamas rapprochement, i.e. an assassination attempt, and the continued displacement of peoples across the globe. So first we turn to Gaza, where a car bombing targeting Hamas security chief Tawfiq Abu Naim left the Hamas official hospitalized. Abu Naim, who is stated to be in moderate condition, is an ardent supporter of Palestinian reunification, and this bombing comes amid the most serious round of talks between Fatah and Hamas in years. But Abu Naim has also been leading the Hamas's recent efforts against the Islamic State in Gaza, and though later concluding that ISIS was behind the attack, Palestinian officials still blamed Israel first.
نحن اليوم نوجه أصابع الاتهام مباشرة إلى الاحتلال وأذنابه وأصابعه وأيديه الذين لا يروق لهم أن يكون الشعب الفلسطيني آمنا مطمئنا ولا أن يرسم الشعب الفلسطيني بالأمن والاستقرار، لا قياداته ولا أعمدة وأركان الأمن في هذا البلد. وبالتالي إذا كان لنا ونحن نتحدث اليوم عن الغرض الأساسي والمستفيد الأول من هذه العملية هو الاحتلال وذيول الاحتلال، لكن أيضا هناك محاولة على ما يبدو التأثير على المصالحة الوطنية. نحن نعتقد أن هذا الحادث لا ينفصل عن التأثير على المصالحة الوطنية كما يريد من فعلوه، لكن نحن نطمن أبناء شعبنا أننا ماضون في المصالحة الوطنية رغم هذا الجرح.
هذه الأيادي الآثمة التي امتدت ستصل إليها إن شاء الله يد العدالة الفلسطينية، ونعتقد بأنه الاحتلال وأعوان الاحتلال هم اللي بيتحملوا مسؤولية هذه الجريمة النكراء. أدعو إخواننا في حركة فتح وأدعو الأخ أبو مازن على وجه الخصوص إلى التسريع في خطوات تنفيذ المصالحة الفلسطينية حتى نقطع الطريق على أي طرف يريد أن يخرب هذه المصالحة، وأيضا حتى يتم تمتين الجبهة الداخلية لشعبنا في وجه أي محاولة من هذا القبيل. بشكل عام السيد اللواء بخير، صحته ممتازة، معنوياته عالية جدا.
Colonel Eisen, I'm going to start with you. What is the significance of an attack like this at this time?
It's mainly supposed to show the problems within the Palestinian arena, within the Gaza Strip, pretty much between Fatah and Hamas, but I would approach it in a different way. Okay. Found it very interesting to see how the different Hamas people initially, of course, blame the occupation, because they blame the occupation for everything. But then they actually talk about the ones who are opposing the Palestinian reconciliation. Okay. The Palestinian reconciliation is mainly being led by the strength of Egypt. Egypt wants Hamas to act not with the Islamic State province that's inside on the other side of the border, right, but against them, both in Sinai, but especially within the Gaza Strip. And in this case, I want to hesitantly say that I would say this is actually a domestic Palestinian issue of different Palestinians within the Gaza Strip who are trying to fight yes and no against reconciliation. So it isn't only inside Israel that we have voices that question the Palestinian reconciliation. Here we're having Palestinian voices in the Gaza Strip who are actively, violently trying to oppose it.
Do you think, Dr. Kedar, do you think that this is maybe ISIS's way of just trying to, stay relevant, or is this, as Colonel Eisen said, is this, just them saying emphatically, we're against reconciliation?
Well, this is only one of the possibilities that ISIS people or ISIS-like people who are in Gaza, the Salafis. However, don't forget that most of them are behind the bars, being tortured in methods which despicable, how Hamas actually treat them. And no doubt they want to revenge. Some of them actually died in those dungeons of torture by the hands of the Hamas, especially this Abu Naim guy. So they do have good reasons why to try to kill this man. However, there are some more parties, not only the Salafis. First of all, inside Hamas, there are people who are against the reconciliation because they are afraid that at the end of the day, they will have to get rid of their weapons if the reconciliation goes forward. And Jordan, of course, today is against the reconciliation as it is because the King Abdullah is afraid that Hamas will take over the PA. And he will find himself with a Hamas stan near him on the Jordan River.
So has Jordan made any sort of demands on the reconciliation?
Definitely. During the last few days, there were some very angry phone talks between Abu Mazen and King Abdullah, who didn't believe what he's reading, that they have some kind of reconciliation without dismantling the weapons of Hamas. This is something for the Jordanian king is outrageous. So he might also try to jeopardize this reconciliation from his own side with his friends. Another power which could do it is actually the Fatah. Because the Fatah want to show that Hamas actually have no control. Because Hamas come to the reconciliation from a position of power. After all, they control Gaza. Fatah wants to show that they don't have any control on Gaza because even one of the people was assassinated or tried to be assassinated. So this could be another party which could have arranged this blast, but it's not the last one. The most important one is that Hamas themselves did it. First of all, nobody knows how he was injured. He was released from the hospital one day after he was injured. So it might be only some kind of makeup of a terrorist attack in order to show, hey, hold us or help us because we have the Salafis, and without us, you'll have to deal with them. So this could be some kind of a game between all kinds of parties, Egypt, Jordan, PLO, Hamas, inside workers, things like this, in addition to the occupation, as Miri mentioned.
So that actually, that is a question that I wanted to ask earlier, and Colonel Eisen, I want to maybe get your point of view on that. Do you think Hamas maybe did this to themselves?
No. I think that that's one of those sort of things that we like to bring up because, of course, they have to, let's blame them and the conspiracy theories of blaming them.
They are working in the Middle East day and night.
The Middle East work, in that sense, here we live inside an arena where anything goes, and the world of today also of all sorts of types of news, that's also up there. First of all, I don't think that he wasn't injured. In that sense, it's like, I don't need to go to the extent that Hamas are inventing as having been in the hospital, having been let out. Let's just go for yes, but let's just go for the frontal right now, the man sitting in the hospital bed as we can see it in that sense, and that he was injured. And I definitely agree with Dr. Kedar that it could be all sorts of different elements who tried to do so. What it shows from my point of view, actually, more than anything else, is actually the weakness of Hamas right now. And the weakness that they're going into the reconciliation, because it's not coming from a point of strength of Hamas, that's coming from a point of weakness as Hamas. That's why they're going for the reconciliation. The fact that all of the demands that they had for reconciliation before that, they have all gone down right now. The only one that's left, which for us is incredibly central, is this issue of the armed weapons. But on that one, at least Abu Mazen made the statement that he would not allow them to have armed weapons. I'm not saying that they're going to agree, but it shows in that sense that Hamas, who right now do rule in Gaza, don't rule even in Gaza. That they are attacked within, if it's by themselves, it's by the Salafis, it's by the Fatah, they don't control where they are. That they've gone into the reconciliation, even though that isn't what they'd like to have happen. And to me, it shows their weakness right now, and that's something which is important for us to acknowledge.
Well, just a little comment.
Please.
The film which you just showed actually raises the questions if he's injured, because he's operating both his feet together, although he was allegedly injured in his feet. Look at this. Just look at this. How both his feet are functioning, and he smiles. Okay, somebody who is just injured does not smile in such a way as he does. So,
Well, I mean,
and walking home day after.
I'd like, I don't know if we can make such a claim just by watching the video, but it's certainly possible. And something I want to jump back to again, though, is how
we
they
know very well about Hollywood. Hollywood,
True.
How they produce all kinds of events.
Dr.
How did that-
Degadar,
we
doesn't
do it
change in a sense,
for many
though.
years. For many
It
years,
doesn't change the essence of it. If
of
they
course it doesn't
decided
change the
to
essence.
stage
But
it again,
I
it shows their
highly doubt if it
weakness.
really happened. And maybe, maybe they did something. They put something with noise, but without really injuring somebody.
So then the
And
question is why they're staging. If it's staged or not staged,
I wouldn't
it's
be
pointing
surprised
out.
if it's staged.
Again, that's your
Hamas are
claim. I
experts in
don't know
staging,
if it's staged, but I think that no matter
Hamas
what
staged
happens,
many operations. Hamas staged
you're going on to a different arena.
Okay.
I'm here right now. To me, what's
Okay.
important right now is
Well,
the fact that
we have to
staged or not staged, it doesn't
have to
matter
be very
either way.
doubtful about
It shows
anything
how
which
weak they
Well, I'd
are.
like-
we have to be very doubtful
like-
about what happens in the Middle East.
No, I'd like to kind of ask about that, because Colonel Eisen is saying that, whether or not they staged it, it ends up making Hamas look weak. Do you agree?
No, their power is their weakness. Means they say, hey, if you don't help us by giving us better deal in the reconciliation, you'll end up dealing with the ISIS. So come with us to all kinds of terms, because otherwise you have to deal with them. So this is some kind of game which they might be willing to produce such a event in order to create this picture.
All right, well, going back to originally blaming Israel, of course, as you said earlier, Hamas tends to blame Israel for just about everything under the
But
sun.
this is a Pavlovian reaction.
Well, and that's kind of what I want to get at. Why are they why is it so easy to blame Israel and to point fingers before checking? Doesn't that ultimately do a disservice to the Palestinians?
For this, you have to really listen to what this Khalil al-Hayya said. He said, we accuse the occupation and all those who cooperate with the occupation.
Absolutely.
Now, those cooperate with the occupation could be everybody. Could be the Salafis, as they blame them. Could be the Jordanians. Could be the PLO. Could be the Egyptians. And could be anyone who walks on the ground, could be collaborator with the occupation. So he called it the occupation, then he really he means what he says, that all those who collaborate with the occupation.
So really, they're painting somebody as a collaborator is just a buzzword for anybody who's dissenting voice from the state.
This is the discourse of the Middle East. It is not like in America. In America or in Europe, when we have to blame somebody, you blame him. Here in the Middle East, you go around.
I'm not sure if that's true nowadays, even in the world. I think that nowadays in the world, they also blame people in a
the
very
world of
different
fake
way.
news.
I think that we are in a new arena when it comes to that,
Okay.
also in other arenas.
Means the Middle East
the
arrived
Middle
already
East-
Europe and
Yeah,
America.
well, slightly different people in a sense as I'm looking at
Okay.
them in and around. But I think that what adds into that, because I agree with Moti in that in a sense of what goes on, that this is something, not only can you invent it, you can do all sorts of things, but I'm looking at the end target in that sense. Because right now, the Middle East is not a stable arena. Hamas within the Middle East doesn't really know where to stand itself within this unstable arena. And the one place where it used to have essence, where it used to have strength, was in Gaza. And they don't even have that there. And in that sense, that slow slope where they have gone down from being the rulers of Gaza, 2011, when after the revolution in Egypt, when it was the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood inside the Gaza Strip, and what they actually probably most want to go to are elections again. I think that the Hamas feel that the elections, in the oddest way, give them the most legitimacy. They'll win in elections. It has to do with the way that the system is, not because they'll get the popular vote, as we know to call it nowadays, but because they will get the vote for the different
They'll make
seats.
sure that they
and then
win
they
that
can
vote.
come out and to the Western world say, look, we're winning in elections, and to themselves, they'll know exactly where they have their strength.
All right,
Well,
well,
don't
unfortunately,
forget that the party which succeeded to bring Hamas to their knees is Egypt. By closing
I'm
Rafah
agreeing.
and all this.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave that subject at that. Moving on, as we've previously reported, the fight against the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq has begun to near its end, but many battles in the Middle East still continue to rage on. The Syrian civil war, Iran's growing influence, the Kurdish struggle for statehood, and while all that's going on, many have started to forget the civilians who got caught in the middle. Millions have flooded mostly into Europe, looking to escape the bloody battlegrounds, but local governments, particularly in Greece, which is the bridge to Europe, are struggling to keep up with the numbers.
We see that there's a big increase in number of people arriving. The numbers have really gone up and are continuing to increase in the last 2 months. There is very little movement of people from the islands to the mainland. So I see that the problem is going to get worse.
عارفين هيك الوضع نضل تحت القصف وما بنجي لهون.
نطفي لنا صالح انا اطفالي مثلا لا نفسيته كثير تعبانه مثلا يعني حتى اكل الكامب ما عم بياكلوه يعني بس يطلع صوت زياده مثلا بيتخانقوا بيخافوا اطفالي صار يخافوا هلا يصير كثير مشاكل بالكامب صار يخافوا الاطفال يعني ما عم بيساعدوا يناموا بالليل ايام بعض الايام بالليل بيفوقوا بيصيحوا بيبكوا.
And now I'm going to open up this time to you, Professor Gadal. I know Israel has helped thousands of Syrians over the border over the past few years since the civil war has begun, but does Israel have any sort of responsibility? Can Israel or should Israel do anything more?
Well, in general, any Israeli intervention in any Arab country, state, or society is viewed as illegitimate. Because anyone who takes any help from Israel is viewed as collaborating with Israel and actually empowering Israel, which can later come and say, hey, we did this and we did that. So, to begin with, in general, really, generally speaking, Israel should refrain from doing anything in the open air. If you do something, do it behind the scenes. Don't talk about this. Don't publish anything. Don't let cameras come into the scene and leave yourself out from the open eye of the world, especially. This is the only way how you can get things, because those who know that you support them know it. Later on, you can do something with this, but don't do it in public, because you actually burn them.
Colonel Eisen, how do you respond to that? What's our obligation as a citizen of the Middle East?
It's a fascinating thought. Are we Middle Eastern? Are we Western? In our economy, we're the economy of an island because we don't have diplomatic relations, not with Lebanon, not with Syria. We do have with Jordan and with Egypt, but we actually don't have economic ties with them, barely. And I'm saying that when I'm looking at the pictures of the refugees, because as human beings, we can try and help. We're Israel, we're a Western country, we're going to try and gather what we can to go out and help. But I absolutely agree with Moti. There's no question whatsoever that for the Middle Eastern public, we're the tainted side. If we do something, they won't touch it. If we send in, nappies, diapers, and it says on it something Israeli, they're going to look at it and go, oh, it's from Israel, or water, or food. But that doesn't mean that we don't help. We can do so quietly. We can do so under the radar. I want to hope that we're doing more. I'm going to disagree with a bit something that actually was presented before in that sense. Most of the refugees have not gone to Europe. The largest bulk of refugees by far are in Turkey, and I still don't think of Turkey as being Europe. Sure. And Turkey, most of the refugees that have arrived in Turkey are not in camps. We're heading in there almost to 3 million people, of which half than a million are in camp. 2.5 million are in Turkey. So it's Muslims coming to a Muslim Turkish-speaking country. 1,200,000 refugees are in Lebanon, our neighbor to the north. These different impacts of the movement of people in and around are things that are going to hit us back from behind. The imbalancing of what it does to a country like Lebanon, what it does to a country like Jordan that we have a peace treaty with. And those are places where I think that we can quietly, not above the radar because we're tainted, try and help out with probably 2 to 2.5 million Syrians who under the radar are in Jordan. And Jordan, anything that happens there is going to impact us.
Do you think that it'll come back to haunt us, all these people flooding into Lebanon and Jordan?
Look, I think that the best way to help them is to convince the world to make the countries which are the most responsible for the atrocities in Syria to pay for this and to take care of those poor people. I mean Iran.
So how do we go about doing
Iran,
that?
I mean Russia, I mean Turkey. Turkey is the country from which all the jihadists came to the Islamic State since 2014 until 2015. Two years, which thousands of those jihadists devastated Iraq and Syria came from Turkey. Even Israelis who went to Turkey. So why shouldn't Turkey do something about this?
Because
but Iran,
it's not going to happen.
But Iran got the nuclear agreement with the world without paying anything in the refugee issue. Why didn't the world demand that for this agreement about the nuclear issues, shouldn't Iran take 100,000, 200,000 of these refugees? Because Iran is responsible for this by supporting the Syrians.
It's very interesting in that sense as you look at it in that sense, and I'm like, Neither you nor I were inside the room in the nuclear negotiations. Neither one of us, I will say, liked the nuclear deal with Iran. But before I go and talk with them about the refugees, I talk with them about their support for terrorism, which also is not in the nuclear deal.
Okay.
But when we're talking about the people right now, when we want to be realistic about it, I don't see the world imposing, not on Iran, not on Turkey, in any way a responsibility about the refugees. But there's a huge difference. No, but there's a huge difference between the two countries. First of all, most of the refugees from Syria are overwhelmingly Sunni Muslims. And those Sunni Muslims are going to Turkey. They're not going to Shiite Iran. They also don't share a border.
Well, there are
Turkey
40%
and Syria.
of Iran are Sunni. The Kurds and the Baloch are Sunni. They could go there if this is the problem.
Yeah, well, the Kurds are something else, which we mentioned in that sense before, and the Kurds are a whole additional problem within the Middle East. But when we look at these millions of people who are moving in the Middle East, to stand up now and say, and the way to resolve it is to make Iran responsible, to me, that's kind of like saying, okay, we're not going to take care of it, and it's going to blow up, from my point of view, in Jordan, a country that we have a strategic alliance with. And I think that to say that Iran is going to take care of it, I don't think that's going to happen.
Not
I
at
think
all.
that absolutely.
If the Iranians knew that they're gonna their deal will be cancelled if they don't do something about
think
the
it's
refugees,
gonna be
only because the world
cancelled
wants it, they would do it.
Well, let's get
so.
back on topic from Iran, off of Iran, and back actually to something that you mentioned earlier about responsibility being bore of the countries who kind of had the most influence in the issue in the first hand. So let's go now to Israel's relationship with Myanmar and the arms that were allegedly sold to Myanmar during the time of an ethnic cleansing campaign or a campaign against Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. So, does Israel have any sort of...
Well, I didn't get deeply into this issue, but as much as I know, Israel supplies Myanmar with weapons for many years. It didn't start now. It didn't start with this ethnic cleansing. When we sell weapons, when any country sells weapons, it doesn't know what will happen with these weapons in the end of like 4 or 5 years down the road. So what?
Could you not bear responsibility once those weapons are received?
Israel is in this case just like every other weapon supplier all over the world. Americans, Russians, French, British, everybody sells weapons without any clue what will be with these weapons 5 years after you give the weapons.
Have any countries in the world stopped their relations with Myanmar because of what's going on? I really don't think that we need to take on ourselves more responsibility than anybody else. I absolutely agree here with Dr. Kedar. The issue of weapons sales in the world is a huge issue. It is not unique to selling to Myanmar. Sure. We could ask that about any African country or Asian country. And I think in that sense that Israel does have very clear guidelines to those who sell arms. We don't sell arms to countries that we don't have diplomatic ties with. We don't sell arms to places where you have different types of regimes in that sense. In this case, it is a sad, horrific tragedy, but I certainly would not put that at Israel's door. I would add it in that this instability of Muslims moving around, be it from Syria to Turkey or from Syria outside into the world, the moving around from Libya, from Northern Africa, of Yemen and the different types, and adding into that now the instability of Muslims leaving Myanmar into Bangladesh, another poor country, there's a tie-in here of these Muslim refugees that I'm kind of wondering when the Muslim countries, the big Muslim countries, the largest ones, if they're Indonesia or Pakistan or India itself, it's not even a question of absorbing, but when are they going to step up and help their fellow Muslims in a way that it's obvious to everybody that we would help fellow Jews in any country in the world as a state, as an idea. And this we don't see at all.
All right, well, unfortunately, on that note, we have run out our time for the good word, so that's the end of the show. That's all the time we have for this week's edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly. Thanks again to our guests, Dr. Kedar and Colonel Eisen, and to all of you out there watching. See you next week, and shalom from Israel.